It was supposed to be the perfect getaway, a solo camping trip in the vast, quiet forests of Washington, a place I had long dreamed of visiting. I had planned to spend most of my time in Seattle, but the lure of nature was irresistible, and I decided to venture into the wilderness for a night of solitude. It had been years since I last camped, and this time it was just me, the fire, and the stars. The journey to the campsite was easy, less than 3 hours from Seattle. The area was isolated, offering the peace and quiet I craved, yet remnants of previous campers littered the surroundings, rusty cooking pots and scattered trash. I chose a small patch of land beside a tree to set up my tent. There was nothing remarkable nearby, just the trees and the distant hum of nature. As night fell, I lit a fire and settled in, making s'mores and watching the flames dance. The serenity was perfect, until it was interrupted. A man appeared out of nowhere. He walked right up to the fire and sat at the opposite side. My heart skipped a beat. "Hey, you camping around here too?" I asked, trying to mask my growing unease. But the man didn't respond. He simply stared at me, then stood up without a word and walked away. Confused and unsettled, I scanned the surrounding woods. There was no sign of anyone else. The man's sudden appearance and abrupt departure left me uneasy, but I dismissed it as nothing more than an odd encounter. As the night deepened, I extinguished the fire, crawled into my tent, and tried to fall asleep. But sleep didn't come easily. An hour passed before the eerie silence was broken by an unusual sound, the crackle of a campfire. I opened my eyes, and to my horror, I saw the orange glow of a fire flickering in front of my tent. My heart began to race. I unzipped the tent, and there, sitting around the fire, were 4 men, one of whom was the same man who had appeared earlier. They all stared at me without saying a word. A cold chill ran down my spine. I froze in place, my mind scrambling for an explanation. I had no idea who these people were or why they were here, but the situation felt dangerously wrong. Before I could react, one of the men spoke in a language I didn't understand, and 2 of them stood up, grabbed me, and began patting me down. They took my phone and wallet. I was powerless against them. These men were much bigger and stronger. They dragged me away from the campsite, deeper into the woods. The fear was overwhelming. My heart pounded in my chest as we walked for what felt like miles. Tears threatened to spill, but I held them back. I knew resisting was futile, but I couldn't shake the thought that this might be the end. They finally shoved me to the ground, and one of them hit me hard on the head. The world spun as I lost consciousness. When I came to, I had no idea where I was. My head throbbed, and the forest was pitch black. I stumbled to my feet, disoriented and terrified, with no idea which direction to go. The weight of panic settled over me as I began to move, praying that I was heading towards safety. I walked for what felt like forever, but the woods remained dark and silent. My legs ached, and my mind grew foggy from the fear and exhaustion. I didn't know if I was walking in the right direction, or if I was getting even more lost. After what seemed like hours, I saw a flickering light in the distance. It was a flashlight, moving through the trees. Relief flooded my chest as I sprinted toward the light, screaming for help. But when I got closer, my blood ran cold. The figure holding the flashlight turned toward me, revealing a man, followed by 3 others behind him. My instinct told me to run, and I didn't hesitate. I bolted away, heart hammering in my chest, and they didn't follow. I kept moving, terrified, until finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw the faint glow of the interstate. At daybreak I flagged down a car, and the moment I stepped into safety, I felt the weight of the night lift. I contacted the police, and they recovered my car and belongings, but the trauma stayed with me. The men who had attacked me hadn't killed me, but they had left me with a sense of terror I couldn't shake. Reflecting on the night, I realized that if I hadn't encountered those men a second time, frightening as it was likely the only reason I was still alive today. That was the closest I'd ever come to death, and the memory would haunt me forever. It was just past 1 a.m. when I checked my phone, during my late-night drive through a dense forest. The rain had been relentless, pouring down in sheets, making visibility nearly impossible. The only comfort was the hum of my car and the steady rhythm of the wipers, but even that couldn't shake the unease settling in my stomach. Apple Maps was showing that I had 62 miles left to go to my next turn, but there was something strange. The app wasn't moving. My car wasn't even showing as moving on the screen. I tried refreshing the map, but it stubbornly remained frozen, still saying I had 62 miles to go. The lack of street names or landmarks made me feel increasingly disoriented. The rain continued to fall harder, and I was beginning to question my decision to drive through these backwoods roads in the dead of night. As I focused on the road ahead, I noticed the faint glow of a billboard, almost as if it were mocking the isolation of the area. A motel, right there in the middle of nowhere. How could this even exist? The motel appeared to be a last resort in an otherwise abandoned stretch of forest. The lot was empty, save for a lone truck parked on the side of the road. I figured the driver was probably just as lost as I was. Hesitant but in need of some clarity, I pulled into the parking lot, hoping to at least get some information or rest before figuring out how to get back on track. Minutes passed, and I sat in my car, fidgeting with my phone in an attempt to get some sort of signal. But then, just as I was about to give up and head into the motel, a knock on my window startled me. I jolted in my seat, heart racing. A man stood there, drenched from the rain, his face obscured by a tangled beard and wet hair. He didn't seem like he had any particular place to go, his eyes not quite meeting mine as he asked for directions to a very specific address. The strange thing? I didn't recognize the street or location he mentioned. I told him, honestly, that I was just as lost as he was. He frowned, smiled, and then nodded as if the conversation had ended, turning to walk back toward the truck. A sinking feeling gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake the thought that something was off. The truck had been parked alone in the lot when I arrived, and it seemed too coincidental that the man would appear at that exact moment. Something wasn't right. I gathered my courage and exited the car, heading for the motel's entrance. The front room was dark and eerily silent. I leaned over the counter, peering into the back rooms, but there was no sign of anyone. It was then that the front door creaked open behind me, and I froze, slowly turning to see the same man standing there, wet and dripping. His expression was different now, cold, sinister. He had one hand shoved deep into his coat pocket, but the look in his eyes made my skin crawl. Something about him felt wrong, like I wasn't supposed to be here. Before I could react, he moved toward me, and instinctively I tried to step past him, desperate to get out of there. But the man blocked my way, not physically, but in a way that felt almost like a warning. I tried to push past him, and made a break for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I heard him follow me, his footsteps slow but deliberate. As I reached my car and scrambled inside, I saw him emerging from the building, his cold, fury-filled eyes locked onto mine. I locked the doors just as he reached the window, and began pulling on the handle with all his strength. My car shook with the force of his attempts, and my pulse raced, each second feeling like an eternity. The man didn't stop. He yanked harder, the car rocking back and forth as he tried to open the door. I could feel the tension rising in the air, but the automatic locks clicked shut, and I knew I had only moments to escape. With my heart pounding in my ears, I slammed the car into drive and sped out of the parking lot, nearly running him over in my panic. The headlights illuminated his figure for just a moment before he disappeared into the darkness, still standing there, watching me. As I sped away, the rain continued to pour, and the forest seemed to swallow me whole. When I finally reached an intersection, and left the forest behind, I was still shaking. I kept telling myself that I had narrowly escaped something worse than just being lost. The next day I looked up the motel. It was supposed to be closed for months, yet the sign still flickered, and the strange man had been there, waiting. I didn't know who he was or what his intentions were, but I had no doubt that my escape had been the only thing that saved me that night. I wasn't just lost in the woods. I had stumbled into something far darker than I could have ever imagined. It was the kind of adventure I had always dreamed of. A solo hike through the wilderness. At 25, I was living on my own for the first time, and I yearned for the challenge of pushing myself, of conquering nature alone. So I set off on my first big trail, an 8-hour hike I found online. It seemed simple enough, with well-defined paths leading to an overlook of the valley. What could possibly go wrong? The trail started out narrow but well-trodden, the kind where you could almost hear the history of each footstep before yours. As I moved deeper into the forest, I felt a strange mix of excitement and calmness. This was supposed to be my moment of accomplishment. But soon the reality of the challenge set in, and the path grew steeper, and the trees thicker. With every step, the noise of the world around me grew fainter until only the sound of my boots on gravel remained. As the hours passed, I kept checking my watch, and a sense of unease crept over me. It was already 6 hours into the hike, and the end of the trail was nowhere in sight. The website had promised an 8-hour round trip, but I was far behind. The thought crossed my mind that maybe I should have turned back earlier, but the temptation to finish the trail overwhelmed my judgment. The prospect of standing at that overlook, gazing at the vastness of the valley, was too enticing. I pressed on. Then something caught my eye, a set of footprints. They weren't mine. I paused, my heart skipping a beat. They were fresh, and they stretched across the path, leading deep into the forest. I had walked this trail for hours, and I was sure no one else had passed this way. The realization hit me hard. I wasn't alone. I hesitated, my mind racing. Should I follow the footprints? Should I go back? In the end, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to continue, thinking the trail might loop back around soon enough. But as I ventured deeper, the path began to widen unnaturally. It felt wrong. This trail had been thin and clear from the start, but now it was different. Too different. I had somehow wandered off the main trail. Panic set in. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows over the forest. My phone's battery was low, and I had left my flashlight in the car. The fear of the dark began to grip me. The forest around me felt oppressive, like it was closing in, watching me. I turned around trying to retrace my steps, but the more I walked, the more I realized I couldn't recognize anything. The trees, the ground, the layout, it was all wrong. My mind spun in confusion as the reality of being lost began to sink in. Every turn I took led me deeper into the dark heart of the forest. I had no idea which way to go. Then I heard it. Footsteps, faint at first, then louder. They were coming from behind me. Someone else was out there, following me. I froze, my heart racing, breath caught in my throat. I wasn't alone. The sound of gravel crunching underfoot was unmistakable. Someone was walking in my direction, and I didn't know whether it was a rescue or something far more sinister. I turned my head, trying to catch a glimpse of who it was, but the dense trees blocked my view. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I called out, hoping to hear a human voice, but all I got was eerie stillness in response. Then, a cold breath, like fog, appeared from behind a tree about 10 feet away from me. I couldn't see the figure, but I could feel its presence. It was watching me, waiting. Fear surged through me, but I had no choice. I had to move. I turned and bolted down the trail, praying I was headed in the right direction. The footsteps started again, following me, but the sound never got closer. It was as if whatever it was toying with me, letting me feel the weight of its pursuit. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled over the rocks and roots in the dark. I didn't dare stop to look back. After what seemed like an eternity, I finally saw the light of my car in the distance. The forest behind me was silent again. No footsteps, no breath, nothing. It wasn't until weeks later, when I saw the news, that I realized just how close I had been to something terrible. 2 bodies were found in that very forest, near the trail I had hiked. The authorities never caught who was responsible, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stood just feet away from the killers, hiding in the shadows, watching me walk by. It was the kind of close call I would never forget. That night in the woods had changed me. I never went hiking alone again, but the forest would forever haunt my dreams. I had been lucky, but others hadn't been.